At a busy airport in New York City, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the terminals. The air buzzed with the sound of engines roaring, announcements blaring over loudspeakers, and people rushing to catch their flights. Among them was a woman who stood out not because of what she wore or how she carried herself, but because of her quiet confidence. She wasn't dressed in expensive clothes or shiny accessories. Instead, she had grease stains on her hands and a worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder. Her name, Jordan Carter. Jordan was no ordinary traveler. She was a mechanic, a damn good one at that. Just hours earlier, she had been called in to fix an urgent problem with a private jet belonging to none other than Alexander Hartley, one of the richest men in the world. A billionaire tech mogul known for his icy demeanor and sharp suits, Alexander didn't care much about anyone outside his circle of power players. He certainly hadn't given a second thought to the mechanic sent to save his plane from disaster. When Jordan arrived at the hangar earlier that day, she found herself surrounded by a group of snooty assistants and security guards. They looked her up and down, sneering at her casual attire and questioning why someone like her had been assigned such an important task. "Are you even qualified?" one of them asked sarcastically, as if her presence alone was some kind of mistake. But Jordan didn't let it get to her. She knew her worth. Ignoring their jabs, she got straight to work. It turned out there was a serious issue with the landing gear mechanism, something that could have caused catastrophic damage during takeoff. With steady hands and years of experience guiding her every move, Jordan fixed the problem just in time. When she finished, the jet was ready to fly safely again. But did anyone thank her? No. Instead, they dismissed her without so much as a nod, leaving her feeling small and invisible. Now, as Jordan walked through the crowded terminal, still carrying the weight of that humiliation, she couldn't help but replay the scene in her mind. How could people be so blind to talent when it came wrapped in a package they weren't expecting? Shaking off the frustration, she reminded herself that this wasn't the first time, and probably wouldn't be the last, that she'd faced judgment based on appearances rather than ability. Still, it stung. As she neared the gate, something caught her eye. Out on the runway, one of the lights seemed off. Not broken exactly, but cracked. At first glance, it might not seem like a big deal, but Jordan's instincts told her otherwise. Years of working with machines had taught her to trust her gut. That tiny crack could mean trouble, not just for one plane, but for everyone using the runway. If debris flew loose while planes were taking off or landing, it could cause chaos. She approached an airport employee nearby and pointed it out. "Hey, I think you need to check that light," she said, gesturing toward the runway. The man barely glanced in the direction she indicated. Yeah, we'll look into it," he muttered dismissively before walking away. Clearly, he didn't take her seriously. After all, what would a random traveler know about runways, especially one who looked more like a mechanic than a pilot or engineer? Frustrated but unwilling to give up, Jordan tried talking to another staff member. This time, she was met with outright annoyance. "Lady, we've got bigger things to worry about than a little crack," the woman snapped. "Go catch your flight." Jordan clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She wanted to scream to make them understand how dangerous this could be, but she knew arguing wouldn't change anything. People only listened when it was too late, when the worst had already happened, and deep down she feared that's exactly where things were headed. Back inside the terminal, passengers continued streaming toward their gates, unaware of the potential danger lurking outside. Meanwhile, Alexander Hartley boarded his luxurious private jet, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding below. To him, the world revolved around efficiency and control. Everything always went according to plan, or so he believed. Minutes ticked by as the jet prepared for takeoff. Inside the cabin, champagne glasses clinked and soft music played. Passengers chatted animatedly, excited about their destinations. Alexander sat near the front, scrolling through emails on his phone, detached from the chatter around him. His mind was elsewhere, focused on business deals and strategies. He gave no thought to the mechanic who had saved his plane earlier, or the fact that she might have saved him again without him realizing it. Then, suddenly, everything changed. A loud bang echoed across the tarmac. The crack in the runway light finally gave way, sending shards of metal flying. One piece struck Alexander's jet, damaging a crucial hydraulic line. Alarms blared inside the cockpit as the pilot scrambled to regain control. Panic spread among the passengers as the plane veered dangerously close to the edge of the runway. Inside the terminal, the commotion drew immediate attention. Screens flickered to live footage of the scene, showing the crippled jet struggling to stay upright. Gasps filled the room as people realized the gravity of the situation. For a moment, Jordan froze, watching in horror as her worst fears came true. Then, without hesitation, she sprang into action. Grabbing her toolkit, she sprinted toward the exit, ignoring protests from airport staff trying to stop her. "I can fix this," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Let me through." Her heart raced as she reached the runway, dodging emergency vehicles and frantic workers. The sight of the damaged jet hit her hard, but she pushed aside fear and doubt. All that mattered now was saving lives, including those of the very people who had treated her with disdain just hours earlier. And standing there, frozen in shock, was Alexander Hartley himself. As he watched the determined mechanic rush toward the wreckage, his icy exterior began to crack. For the first time, he saw her not as an outsider or someone beneath him, but as a hero. The chaos on the runway was deafening. The sound of alarms blaring from the jet mixed with the shouts of panicked passengers and the screech of tires as emergency vehicles sped toward the scene. Thick clouds of smoke began to rise, making it hard to see clearly. Everyone was scrambling. Airport staff, firefighters, pilots, all trying to figure out what had gone wrong and how to fix it before things got worse. Jordan didn't stop to think about the danger. She sprinted across the tarmac, her boots pounding against the pavement, clutching her toolkit like it was a lifeline. Her mind raced faster than her feet. She knew exactly what needed to be done, even if no one else seemed to understand the severity of the situation. That damaged hydraulic line wasn't just a minor issue. It meant the plane couldn't brake properly. If they tried to move it now or let it sit there without fixing it, disaster could strike at any moment. As she approached the jet, security guards stepped in front of her, arms crossed, blocking her path. "Ma'am, you can't go near the aircraft," one of them barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Jordan shot back, her tone firm but calm. "I'm a mechanic and I know what's wrong with this plane. Let me through or more people are going to get hurt." The guard hesitated, glancing at his partner uncertainly. They weren't used to taking orders from someone who looked like her, someone covered in grease stains, wearing work boots and carrying a dented toolbox. But something in her eyes told them she wasn't bluffing. There was fire behind her, words, determination etched into every line of her face. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the guard stepped aside, muttering under his breath. Jordan wasted no time. As she climbed up onto the wing of the jet, she saw the extent of the damage for herself. Shards of metal jutted out where the hydraulic line had been hit, leaking fluid that pooled below. It was bad, worse than she'd initially thought, but not impossible to fix. Taking a deep breath, she got to work. Inside the cabin, panic was spreading like wildfire. Passengers clung to each other, some crying, others praying aloud. One little girl sat wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed animal tightly while her mother tried to reassure her everything would be okay. The flight attendants did their best to keep everyone calm, but the fear in the air was palpable. And then there was Alexander Hartley. Alexander sat near the front of the plane, gripping the armrests of his seat so tightly his knuckles turned white. For once, he wasn't the picture of confidence and control. His usual icy composure had melted away, replaced by raw terror. He stared out the window, watching as smoke billowed around the wings. Every creak and groan of the plane sent shivers down his spine. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. He was untouchable, invincible. Or at least, that's what he'd always believed. Then he saw her. Through the haze of smoke and confusion, Alexander spotted a figure moving with purpose along the wing of the plane. At first, he thought it was one of the ground crew, someone sent to assess the damage. But as the person leaned closer to inspect the broken hydraulic line, recognition dawned on him. It was her. The mechanic from earlier, the same woman his team had mocked and dismissed without a second thought. For a moment, Alexander couldn't breathe. His chest tightened as he watched her work, her hands steady despite the chaos surrounding her. She moved with precision, pulling tools from her kit and examining the damage carefully. There was no hesitation, no sign of fear, just pure focus. He remembered the way his assistants had laughed at her, the way they'd questioned whether she belonged anywhere near his jet. Now, here she was, risking her life to save theirs. Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave. How could he have been so blind, so arrogant? All those years of thinking he was better than everyone else, smarter, stronger, more important. And yet, when it mattered most, he was powerless, helpless. Back outside, Jordan worked tirelessly. The heat radiating off the engine made sweat pour down her face, but she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the task at hand. Using spare parts scavenged from nearby equipment, she managed to create a makeshift patch for the damaged hydraulic line. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it would hold long enough to get the plane safely back to the gate. Every few seconds, someone would shout questions at her. "What's happening? Can you fix it? How much longer?" But she tuned them out. Distractions wouldn't help anyone right now. Instead, she muttered instructions to herself, visualizing each step in her head before executing it flawlessly. Finally, after what felt like hours but was really only minutes, Jordan signaled to the ground crew that the repair was complete. "Get everyone off the plane," she called out, her voice loud and clear above the noise. "And make sure they stay far away until we're sure it's stable." The relief that followed was immediate. Firefighters helped guide the passengers off the jet, their faces pale but alive with gratitude. Mothers hugged their children tightly, couples held hands, and strangers thanked each other simply for being okay. The tension that had gripped everyone moments ago slowly began to fade. Inside, the terminal news of the incident spread quickly. Screens lit up with live footage of the drama unfolding on the runway. Reporters rushed to interview witnesses, eager to piece together the story of the mysterious mechanic who had saved the day. When Jordan finally stepped away from the plane, exhausted but triumphant, cameras flashed all around her. Microphones were shoved in her face, and reporters fired off questions faster than she could answer them. "How did you know what to do? Were you scared? What's your name?" Jordan blinked, momentarily overwhelmed by the attention. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight like this. Back at her garage in Brooklyn, she was just another worker doing her job. Here, though, she was suddenly a hero. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before speaking. "I'm nobody special," she said simply, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "I just did what needed to be done. Anyone else in my position would have done the same." Her humility only made the crowd cheer louder. People clapped and whistled, praising her bravery and quick thinking. Even the airport staff who had doubted her earlier now looked at her with newfound respect. Some even apologized for not listening sooner, though Jordan brushed it off. She wasn't interested in holding grudges. She just wanted to make sure everyone was safe. Amidst the chaos, Alexander stood quietly to the side, watching everything unfold. He hadn't joined the celebration or spoken to anyone since disembarking the plane. Instead, he hung back, observing the woman who had saved his life, and countless others, with awe and shame. He couldn't shake the image of her working tirelessly on the wing of the jet, completely unfazed by the danger swirling around her. She was fearless, resourceful, and brilliant. Everything he wished he could be. When the commotion died down, and the reporters moved on to chase the next big story, Alexander approached Jordan cautiously. He wasn't sure what to say, how to begin apologizing for the way he and his team had treated her. But as he stood there, looking at her grease-streaked hands and determined expression, he realized he owed her more than words. He owed her a Chance to prove to the world and to herself that she deserved recognition, respect, and opportunity. The next morning, Jordan woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop on the bedside table. At first, she thought it was just another busy day at her garage in Brooklyn, maybe a customer needing an urgent repair or one of her regulars checking in. But as she reached for the device and unlocked the screen, her jaw dropped. Notifications flooded in from every direction. Texts, emails, social media alerts, news headlines. It seemed like the entire world had turned its attention to her overnight. "Mechanic saves lives on runway," read one headline. "Unsung hero prevents disaster," declared another. "Who is the woman behind the miracle fix?" Jordan sat up in bed, rubbing her temples. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. In fact, she'd spent most of her life avoiding it. Growing up, she'd been the quiet kid who preferred tinkering with engines over joining school plays or sports teams. Her passion for fixing things had earned her respect among those who truly understood her work, but rarely beyond that circle. Now suddenly she was everywhere. Reporters wanted interviews. Talk shows invited her as a guest, and strangers online were calling her a real-life superhero. She sighed deeply, feeling torn between pride and unease. On one hand, it felt good to be recognized for her skills after years of being overlooked. On the other hand, she worried about what came next. Fame could open doors, or close them just as quickly if people decided they didn't like what they saw behind the headlines. Determined not to let the chaos derail her routine, Jordan got dressed and headed to her garage. The familiar smell of oil and metal greeted her as she pushed open the door. This place was her sanctuary, where she felt most comfortable and in control. As she started going through her usual tasks, checking inventory, reviewing client requests, testing tools, the peace was shattered by a knock at the entrance. Standing outside was a man in a sharp black suit, holding a clipboard and looking distinctly out of place against the backdrop of rusted car parts and grease-stained floors. He cleared his throat awkwardly before speaking. "Excuse me, are you the mechanic from yesterday? From the airport?" Jordan raised an eyebrow, setting down the wrench she'd been holding. "Depends. Who's asking?" Before the man could respond, a sleek black car pulled up behind him. The driver stepped out, opening the rear door with practiced precision. And then, stepping into view for the second time in less than 24 hours, was Alexander Hartley. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Jordan crossed her arms, sizing him up warily. She hadn't forgotten how dismissive his team had been toward her, or how he himself had barely acknowledged her existence during their brief encounter earlier. What did he want now? Another apology? Or maybe just another opportunity to brush her off? But instead of launching into some rehearsed speech, Alexander surprised her by walking straight up to her, meeting her gaze head-on. His expression was different this time, softer, more genuine. There was none of the icy arrogance she'd seen before, just a man standing humbly in front of someone he knew had saved his life. "I owe you," he began simply, his voice steady but sincere. "What you did? I'll never forget it." Jordan blinked, caught off guard by his directness. She hadn't expected gratitude, not from someone like him. Still, she kept her guard up. "You don't owe me anything," she replied evenly. "I was just doing my job." Alexander shook his head, clearly frustrated with himself. "No, you were doing more than your job. You risked your life to save mine, and everyone else's on that plane. That's not something I take lightly." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. For once, Jordan didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long proving herself to people who refused to see her value that she almost didn't know how to react when someone finally acknowledged it. After a pause, Alexander continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Look, I'm not here to waste your time. I've been thinking about ways to make this right, to show you how much I appreciate what you did. So," he handed her the paper, which turned out to be a proposal. It outlined a partnership, a chance for Jordan to collaborate with his company on developing cutting-edge technology to revolutionize aviation maintenance. The details were impressive: state-of-the-art facilities, unlimited resources, access to top engineers and designers. Essentially everything she'd ever dreamed of having to take her work to the next level. Jordan scanned the document, her heart racing. Part of her wanted to jump at the opportunity. It was everything she'd worked for, everything she'd hoped to achieve someday. But another part of her hesitated. Was this really about her skills, or was it just guilt talking? Would she end up being a token hire? A PR move to polish Alexander's image after the humiliating incident at the hangar? "You're serious about this?" she asked finally, folding the paper and handing it back to him. "I've never been more serious about anything," Alexander replied without missing a beat. "I know I messed up before. My team messed up. We treated you like you didn't belong there, and we were wrong. But I want to fix that. Not because I feel guilty, but because I believe in what you can do." His honesty struck a chord with her. Maybe it was the way he spoke, or maybe it was the vulnerability in his eyes, but for the first time, Jordan believed him. Still, she wasn't ready to commit just yet. "Let me think about it," she said firmly. "This isn't a decision I can make lightly." Alexander nodded, understanding completely. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That you'll at least consider it. Because I think together, we could change the industry. For the better." With that, he turned and walked back to his car, leaving Jordan alone with her thoughts. As the vehicle disappeared down the street, she leaned against the workbench, staring at the proposal in her hand. It was tempting, no doubt about it. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. If she agreed to this partnership, it would mean representing something bigger than herself. It would mean showing the world that people like her, people who didn't fit the mold, deserved a seat at the table. Over the next few days, Jordan weighed her options carefully. She talked to friends, mentors, and even a few trusted clients seeking advice. Most encouraged her to take the leap, reminding her how rare opportunities like this were. Others warned her to proceed cautiously, pointing out the risks of working with someone as powerful and unpredictable as Alexander. In the end, curiosity won out. Jordan decided to meet with Alexander again, this time at his office downtown. The building was everything she expected: sleek glass walls, polished marble floors, and an atmosphere that screamed wealth and power. She felt out of place in her jeans and hoodie, but she held her ground, refusing to let anyone intimidate her. Their conversations started slow, focusing on logistics and technical details, but as they worked together, something shifted. They began opening up to each other, sharing stories about their lives, their struggles, their dreams. Jordan learned that beneath Alexander's polished exterior was a man wrestling with his own insecurities and regrets. Meanwhile, Alexander discovered that Jordan's brilliance extended far beyond mechanics. She had vision, creativity, and a relentless drive to make a difference. Working side by side, they developed ideas that blended innovation with practicality. From advanced diagnostic systems to eco-friendly materials, their projects pushed boundaries and challenged traditional norms. Along the way, they faced resistance. From skeptical colleagues, outdated regulations, and even public criticism, but neither of them backed down. Together, they proved that determination and collaboration could overcome any obstacle. As weeks turned into months, their professional relationship deepened into something more personal. Late-night brainstorming sessions became moments of laughter and connection. Shared victories brought them closer, while setbacks only strengthened their resolve. Sparks flew, not just creatively, but emotionally. Yet both of them were cautious, aware of the complications that could arise from mixing business with pleasure. Despite the challenges, their partnership transformed not only their careers but also the industry itself. Under Jordan's leadership, new standards were set, breaking down barriers for underrepresented groups in STEM fields. Young women, especially, those from marginalized communities, found inspiration in her story, seeing themselves reflected in her journey. And Alexander, once defined by his detachment, rediscovered the importance of empathy, humility, and human connection. By the time their first major project launched, a groundbreaking facility designed to train and empower aspiring mechanics from underserved areas, they had become unstoppable. Standing side by side at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by cheering crowds and flashing cameras, they exchanged a glance filled with mutual respect and admiration. Neither of them could have predicted where this path would lead when they first met on that chaotic runway. But as they looked toward the future, one thing was certain. They were ready to face whatever came next, together. The partnership between Jordan and Alexander quickly became the talk of the aviation world, and beyond. Their collaboration wasn't just about fixing planes or improving maintenance systems. It was about rewriting the rules of an industry that had long been dominated by tradition, privilege, and exclusion. Together, they were proving that innovation didn't have to come from flashy tech startups or billion-dollar corporations. Sometimes it came from people who understood the grit, sweat, and heart it took to keep things running. Their first major project was ambitious, a state-of-the-art training facility designed to empower aspiring mechanics from underserved communities. The idea came from Jordan's own experiences. How hard it had been for her to break into the field. How often she'd been underestimated because of where she came from and what she looked like. She wanted to create a space where talent mattered more than background, where anyone with passion and drive could learn the skills they needed to succeed. Alexander threw his full support behind the initiative, using his resources and influence to bring the vision to life. At first, some skeptics doubted whether he was truly committed, or if this was just another PR stunt to polish his image after the runway incident. But as construction began on the facility, it became clear that this was different. For one thing, Alexander insisted on involving Jordan in every decision, from designing the layout to selecting instructors. He didn't want to simply fund the project. He wanted to learn from her perspective and ensure it reflected her values. As the months passed, their shared mission brought them closer together, not just professionally, but personally. Late nights spent reviewing blueprints turned into deep conversations about their childhoods, their fears, and their dreams. They discovered that despite their vastly different upbringings, they shared a common desire to leave the world better than they found it. Jordan opened up about growing up in a working-class neighborhood, watching her father fix cars in their driveway and dreaming of following in his footsteps. She talked about the challenges she faced as a woman of color in a male-dominated industry. The condescending remarks, the closed doors, the constant need to prove herself. Alexander listened intently, realizing how much he still had to learn about the struggles others endured. In turn, Alexander shared pieces of himself he rarely revealed to anyone. He spoke about the pressure of living up to his family's legacy, the loneliness of being at the top, and the emptiness he'd felt chasing success without purpose. Hearing him speak so vulnerably made Jordan see him in a new light. Beneath the polished exterior was a man searching for meaning, someone who genuinely wanted to make amends for past mistakes. Despite their growing connection, both remained cautious about crossing the line between professional and personal. Mixing business with romance was risky, especially given the stakes of their partnership. What if something went wrong? What if their relationship damaged the trust they'd worked so hard to build? These questions lingered in the back of their minds, unspoken but ever present. Meanwhile, resistance to their efforts mounted. Not everyone welcomed change, especially when it threatened the status quo. Some industry leaders dismissed the training facility as unnecessary, arguing that traditional methods were good enough. Others questioned Jordan's qualifications, suggesting she was only involved because of her heroic moment on the runway. Even within Alexander's own company, there were whispers of discontent among executives who resented having to adapt to new ideas. But Jordan refused to let negativity slow her down. If anything, it fueled her determination. Every criticism, every obstacle became another reason to push harder, to prove the doubters wrong. She poured her energy into recruiting students for the program, traveling to schools and community centers to spread the word. Her authenticity resonated with young people who saw themselves in her story, a reminder that success wasn't reserved for the privileged few. When the facility finally opened its doors, the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of applicants flooded in, eager to seize the opportunity. The selection process was rigorous, focusing not just on technical aptitude but also on character and potential. Jordan and Alexander personally reviewed each application, looking for candidates who embodied resilience, creativity, and a hunger to learn. On opening day, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Families gathered outside the gleaming building, snapping photos and cheering as their loved ones stepped inside for the first time. Inside, classrooms were equipped with cutting-edge tools and technology, while workshops mimicked real-world environments where students could practice their skills. It was everything Jordan had envisioned, and more. During the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Jordan stood at the podium, gripping the microphone tightly. She scanned the crowd, taking in the faces of the students, their families, and the mentors who had supported her along the way. Her voice trembled slightly as she began to speak. "This place isn't just a training center," she said, pausing to steady herself. "It's proof that no matter where you come from, no matter what obstacles stand in your way, you can achieve greatness if you're willing to work for it. I didn't get here alone. I had help from teachers, friends, and even strangers who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And now, it's our turn to pay that forward." The audience erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. When Jordan stepped down, Alexander took her place, his usual composure replaced by raw emotion. He thanked Jordan for inspiring him to rethink what leadership truly meant, and urged the students to embrace every challenge as an opportunity to grow. After the speeches, the celebration spilled into the streets, with food trucks, music, and laughter filling the air. Students mingled with instructors, sharing stories and exchanging contact information. For the first time, many of them felt like they belonged, to a community, to a future filled with possibilities. Amidst the joy, however, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Critics continued to question the sustainability of the program, pointing out the high costs and logistical challenges of maintaining such an ambitious initiative. Some accused Alexander of using Jordan as a poster child for diversity initiatives, while others dismissed the entire effort as a fleeting trend. Jordan and Alexander knew these voices wouldn't disappear overnight. Change rarely came without resistance, and they were prepared to face it head-on. But they also knew they weren't alone. With each student who walked through the facility's doors, with each success story that emerged, they proved that progress was possible, even in an industry resistant to it. That evening, as the festivities wound down, Jordan and Alexander found themselves standing together on the rooftop of the facility, overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, the sky dotted with stars. For a moment, neither of them spoke, content to simply share the quiet. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think success was about numbers, profits, market shares, rankings. But seeing all those kids today, hearing their hopes and dreams, it makes me realize how small those things are compared to what really matters." Jordan smiled, turning to look at him. "And what's that?" "Making a difference," he replied, meeting her gaze. "Leaving something behind that actually means something. Something that helps people." She nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Despite all the challenges ahead, she knew they were on the right path. Together, they had already accomplished more than either of them could have imagined. And as they stood there side by side, it felt like the beginning of something extraordinary, a partnership built on trust, respect, and a shared vision for a brighter future. Neither of them could predict exactly where this journey would lead, but one thing was certain: they were ready to face whatever came next, together. As weeks turned into months, the training facility became more than just a building. It was a beacon of hope for countless young people eager to carve out their place in the world. The students poured their hearts into learning, spending long hours mastering everything from basic engine repairs to advanced diagnostics. They came from all walks of life. Kids who'd grown up tinkering with broken-down cars and junkyards, teenagers fascinated by aviation but unsure how to break into the field, and adults looking for a second chance at a career they loved. Each one brought their own story, their own struggles, and their own dreams. Jordan spent most of her days at the facility, mentoring the students and overseeing the program's progress. She wasn't just a teacher, she was a role model, someone who showed them that success wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. When a student struggled to grasp a concept or grew discouraged after making a mistake, Jordan would pull them aside and share stories from her own journey. "I've messed up more times than I can count," she'd say with a grin, "but every failure taught me something new. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty." Her words resonated deeply with the students, especially those who had faced skepticism elsewhere. One young woman, barely 18, confided in Jordan that her high school guidance counselor had told her mechanics wasn't a real career for someone like her. Another student, a single father trying to provide for his family, admitted he'd been laughed at when he mentioned wanting to work on planes. Hearing these stories broke Jordan's heart, but it also fueled her determination to prove the naysayers wrong. If she could help even one person believe in themselves, she considered it a victory. Meanwhile, Alexander worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the program thrived. He leveraged his connections to secure partnerships with airlines, manufacturers, and tech companies, creating pathways for graduates to land internships and jobs. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Soon, industry leaders began taking notice of the innovative approaches coming out of the facility. Some were skeptical at first, questioning whether a grassroots initiative could deliver results comparable to traditional training programs. But as the first cohort of students completed their courses and started landing positions, the doubters fell silent. The transformation wasn't just happening within the walls of the facility. It was affecting Alexander too. Over time, he found himself changing in ways he never expected. Before meeting Jordan, he'd viewed leadership as a numbers game: maximize profits, minimize costs, and keep shareholders happy. Now, he saw it differently. True leadership, he realized, was about empowering others, not controlling them. It was about creating opportunities for people to shine, not hoarding power for yourself. This shift didn't come easily. Old habits die hard, and there were moments when Alexander reverted to his old ways. During meetings with executives, he sometimes caught himself prioritizing efficiency over empathy, focusing on spreadsheets instead of people. But every time Jordan gently reminded him why they'd started this project in the first place, he snapped back to reality. "We're not here to make money," she'd say firmly. "We're here to change lives." Their dynamic continued to evolve, blending professional collaboration with personal connection. Late nights spent reviewing budgets often turned into conversations about life outside work. They shared meals together, laughed over silly jokes, and occasionally argued passionately about ideas they disagreed on. These moments brought them closer, blurring the lines between partners and friends. But the growing bond between them wasn't without complications. Both felt the tension simmering beneath the surface, a mix of attraction and hesitation. On one hand, they cared deeply for each other, drawn together by shared values and mutual respect. On the other hand, neither wanted to risk jeopardizing what they'd built. What if things went south? What if their relationship affected the students, the program, or their reputations? One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, they found themselves alone in the facility's workshop. The hum of machinery had faded hours ago, leaving only the soft glow of overhead lights illuminating the room. Jordan leaned against a workbench, absently wiping grease off her hands with a rag while Alexander paced back and forth, clearly lost in thought. Finally, he stopped and turned to face her. "Do you ever wonder what we're doing?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. Jordan raised an eyebrow, amused. "What do you mean? We're running a training program, remember?" He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, I mean, us. This thing between us. It feels like we're walking a tightrope, balancing professionalism with something else." She sighed, setting the rag down. "Yeah, I think about it sometimes. Honestly, it scares me. I don't want to mess this up for the students, for the program, for either of us." "I feel the same way," he admitted. "But I also can't ignore how much you mean to me. You've changed my perspective on so many things. I'm not the same person I was before I met you." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then Jordan stepped closer, meeting his gaze steadily. Look, I won't pretend I don't care about you. Because I do. A lot. But we need to be smart about this. If we're going to take that step, we have to be sure it won't hurt what we've worked so hard to build. Alexander nodded, understanding completely. I agree. Let's not rush into anything. We'll figure it out together, as always. With that, they returned to their tasks, though the air between them felt lighter somehow. Neither of them had all the answers, but they trusted each other enough to navigate the uncertainty side by side. Outside the facility, resistance to their efforts persisted. Critics continued to question the program's sustainability, pointing out the financial strain of maintaining such an ambitious initiative. Some accused Jordan of being a token hire, suggesting her involvement was purely symbolic rather than substantive. Others dismissed the entire effort as impractical, arguing that traditional methods were better suited for preparing workers in the aviation industry. Despite the backlash, Jordan and Alexander refused to back down. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they weren't alone. Their students stood as living proof of the program's impact, proof that talent and determination could overcome any obstacle. Every success story, every graduate landing a job, silenced the critics a little more. By the end of the year, the facility had become a symbol of resilience and innovation. News outlets featured glowing profiles of the program, highlighting its unique approach and tangible results. Industry conferences invited Jordan and Alexander to speak about their experiences, drawing standing ovations from audiences inspired by their vision. Through it all, they remained grounded, reminding themselves why they'd started this journey in the first place. For Jordan, it was about giving others the opportunities she'd fought so hard to earn. For Alexander, it was about redeeming himself, not just in the eyes of others, but in his own heart. And as they stood together, watching another group of students celebrate their graduation, they couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, not just in what they'd accomplished, but in the endless possibilities stretching before them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them, together. The training facility had become more than just a place to learn. It was a movement. It wasn't about fixing planes anymore. It was about fixing lives. Each student who walked through its doors carried their own story of struggle and hope, and each graduate proved that change was possible no matter where you started. The program had grown beyond anything Jordan or Alexander could have imagined when they first stood together on that chaotic runway. What began as an act of desperation had turned into a legacy. One crisp autumn morning, the facility hosted its largest event yet, a showcase of innovations created by the students themselves. Dozens of projects lined the halls, ranging from redesigned engine components to eco-friendly fuel alternatives. Families, industry leaders, and reporters filled the space, buzzing with excitement over what these young minds had accomplished. For many of the students, this day marked the culmination of months, even years of hard work. They weren't just presenting ideas. They were proving their worth. Jordan moved through the crowd, stopping at every booth to chat with the students. She watched proudly as one shy teenager demonstrated a tool he'd invented to detect structural weaknesses in aircraft frames. Another group of students explained how their solar-powered charging station could reduce energy costs for airports. These weren't just concepts dreamed up in classrooms. They were practical solutions born out of necessity and creativity. As she paused to admire a prototype for a lightweight fuselage material, Alexander approached her holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you're about to burst with pride," he said, handing her a cup. She smiled, taking a sip before responding, "How can I not? Look around. Every single person here has worked so hard to get here, and now they're showing the world what they're capable of." Alexander nodded, glancing around the room. "It's incredible. You've built something truly special here." "We've built it," Jordan corrected him gently. "This wouldn't have happened without you." He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, you're the heart of this place. I'm just trying to keep up." His humility caught her off guard. Over the past year, she'd seen glimpses of the man beneath the polished exterior, the one who cared deeply about making amends and doing right by others. But moments like this reminded her how far he'd come since that day at the hangar. He wasn't the same distant billionaire who dismissed people without a second thought. Now, he listened, he learned, he grew. After the presentations, everyone gathered outside for the closing ceremony. A stage had been set up near the entrance, decorated with banners celebrating innovation and perseverance. Jordan and Alexander took their places at the front, flanked by some of the top-performing students. As the crowd settled, Jordan stepped up to the microphone. "Today isn't just about showcasing inventions," she began, her voice steady but warm. "It's about showing the world that greatness comes from everywhere, from junkyards, from classrooms, from neighborhoods most people overlook. These students didn't wait for opportunities to find them. They made their own." Applause rippled through the audience, and she paused to let the moment sink in. Then she continued, her tone softening. "When I was younger, I never imagined I'd be standing here. People told me I didn't belong in this industry, that I should focus on something realistic. But I refused to believe them because I knew my potential was greater than their doubts." She gestured toward the students behind her. "And so do all of you." Her words resonated deeply, drawing cheers and whistles from the crowd. When she finished, Alexander stepped forward to speak. Unlike his usual polished speeches filled with corporate jargon, this time he spoke from the heart. "I used to think success was measured in numbers, profits, rankings, market shares," he admitted, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "But watching these students today, and working alongside someone like Jordan, I realize how small those things are compared to what really matters. Success is seeing someone rise above adversity. It's creating spaces where people feel valued and empowered. That's what we're building here, and I couldn't be prouder to be part of it." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to some eyes, including Jordan's. She hadn't expected such raw honesty from him, especially in front of so many people, but it was clear that he meant every word. After the speeches, the celebration spilled into the streets with music, food trucks, and laughter filling the air. Students hugged their families, posed for photos with their projects, and exchanged contact information with recruiters eager to hire them. For many, this day marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chance to step into careers they'd once only dreamed of. As the festivities wound down, Jordan and Alexander found themselves alone on the rooftop of the facility, gazing out at the city lights. The cool breeze carried the faint hum of distant traffic, blending with the quiet between them. Neither spoke for a while, content to simply share the moment. Finally, Alexander broke the silence. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Jordan chuckled, leaning against the railing. "How could I forget? You barely looked at me back then." He winced, guilt flashing across his face. "Yeah, I'm sorry about that, about everything, really. If I'd known then what I know now." She cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Don't apologize. We've both come a long way since then. You've changed, for the better. And, honestly, I don't think I would have pushed myself as hard if it weren't for you pushing back sometimes." Her words surprised him, and he turned to study her expression. "Pushing back?" "Yeah," she said with a grin. "You may not realize it, but your stubbornness kept me going. Whenever I doubted myself, I'd think, if he thinks I can do this, maybe I actually can." They laughed together, the tension melting away. For the first time, neither felt the need to hold back. The walls they'd carefully constructed around their feelings crumbled under the weight of everything they'd shared. "You know," Alexander said softly after a moment, "I never thought I'd meet someone like you, someone who challenges me, inspires me, makes me want to be better." Jordan met his gaze, her heart pounding. "Same here. I never thought I'd trust someone like you, not after everything I've been through. But you've earned it. Every bit of it." Neither needed to say anything else. In that moment, surrounded by the glow of the city and the echoes of the day's triumphs, they leaned in and kissed, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they'd forged. Over the following months, their relationship deepened, blending seamlessly with their professional partnership. Together, they expanded the program, opening new facilities in cities across the country. Each location became a hub of innovation and opportunity, attracting students from all backgrounds. Industry leaders began adopting the techniques and technologies developed by the graduates, transforming the way maintenance was approached worldwide. Critics still lingered, but their voices grew fainter as the program's success became undeniable. Graduates landed jobs at top companies, earning salaries that allowed them to support their families and give back to their communities. Parents thanked Jordan and Alexander for giving their children futures they never thought possible. Teachers praised the curriculum, calling it revolutionary. Even skeptics within Alexander's own company eventually came around, recognizing the value of investing in people rather than profits. Through it all, Jordan and Alexander remained committed to their mission. They traveled the world, sharing their story and advocating for inclusivity in STEM fields. Their journey inspired countless others to break barriers and chase their dreams, proving that collaboration and compassion could achieve what privilege and power alone could not. On AOI, quiet evening several years later, they returned to the rooftop of the original facility. The city below sparkled brighter than ever, a testament to the progress they'd helped create. Hand in hand, they looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of fulfillment that surpassed anything they'd experienced before. "We did it," Jordan whispered, her voice full of wonder. "No," Alexander replied, squeezing her hand. "You did it. I just followed your lead." She smiled, shaking her head. "We did it together. That's what makes it unforgettable." And as the stars twinkled above, they stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future held. Together.